So there were 32 picks in the 2022 draft, and, everyone after the draft always feels like every player is going to work out, but after 1 year, that just can't happen. There are going to be 10 players on my list of the ones that just haven't worked out, and haven't worked out yet is the way to phrase it, because obviously saying any pick is a terrible pick after 1 year is just not fair. But I'm doing the worst picks given what we know now. Undeniably, some of these players will eventually become good players in the future and will make this list look stupid in hindsight, but it's not meant to be something that's going to be able to stand a test of time. It's meant to kind of be a time capsule into what we feel about these players right in this moment. So let me tell you what I feel about these players right in this moment, starting off with number 10. Number 10, the Green Bay Packers selected Devonte Wyatt, and to be honest, this isn't a terrible selection, and he's someone who I liked coming out of college. I liked the pick when it happened, so actually the fact that he fell to 28 was considered a bit of a steal at the time, so I wouldn't necessarily look at this and say, oh, what a terrible decision they made. He's projected to go 24th. The decision was fine. It just hasn't worked out so far, and really, I think he's still played fine in a small sample size. We just haven't really seen him get a lot of playing time for whatever reason. The Packers haven't really given him a ton of opportunities, so it has to be on this list. There are not 10 players who have just came in and looked terrible, just didn't have no redeeming qualities right away, but there has to be 10 guys, so he's number 10. And number 9 with Penning for the Saints, he's another guy who was not a disaster by any means. Actually looked good when we saw him. We barely saw him. He was injured for a lot of it, was picked 19th overall. I think for the Saints, they kind of really wanted him to come in and be an immediate impact player. He is someone who I think is going to take some time, and losing a year of that, I think, is pretty damaging potentially for his development. So again, that's why he's on the list. Like I said, was not a disaster. I think once we get to the top 8, that's when we start to get to some players who I think there's actually maybe at least some concerns about. Number 8, Charles Cross of the Seattle Seahawks, who, Charles Cross was considered the most pro-ready of those top 3 tackles, came in and wasn't a mess. There's, another tackle on this list who we'll talk about in a second who I think was worse, but this was kind of a obvious pick, kind of considered a really good pick by Seattle. It just didn't work out in year 1. So could it work out in year 2? Yeah. Will it work out in year 2? Probably, but he didn't have a great rookie year, wasn't a mess, but I definitely think that they were looking for more even immediately, and maybe it'll get that, but just didn't happen this year. Number 7, Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions, who, again, the pick itself at the time, no issue with. In fact, I actually liked it. Receivers are important. He was my number 1 receiver. Yeah, go after it. But, was injured last year, came in, barely played, made a couple of splash plays, but, hasn't shown a ton just yet. I still think he could be very good for the Lions, but now he has that 6-game suspension, so you are starting to wonder a little bit of hey, you've gotten injured 1 year, you've gotten suspended another year. Are we going to get consistent playing time? As basically, the way it works is that your rookie deals, pretty much only the first 4 years, you actually get cheap value from them. Once you, the 5th-year option has been restructured, so you actually, tend to still have to pay them, not quite as much as you do in the open market, but you still have to give them some money. So half of the cheap years with Williams have basically just gone down the drain. That's not necessarily fair to say, but we won't get a full season of him for at least year 3 now. So that alone is just a disappointment, but it's not really their fault. So that's why it's lower on the list, or not. I guess not lower on the list. That's why it's number 7 and not in the future of this video, I'll say. Number 6, Evan Neal, who had just a disastrous rookie year. He just did. There's no denying it. Why is he only 6th then? Even though he was picked, 7th overall, shouldn't this be number 1 on the list? Well, I am kind of factoring in as well the thought process and also just who the prospect is as a whole. It was a guy who a lot of people liked a lot coming out of college. I don't think that it was a terrible thought process to draft him number 7. In fact, I think it's what most people would have done in that situation, was drafted Neal number 7. I also felt like he was a bit of a project player. I didn't think he was going to come in right away and be great right away. So because of that, I think that while, yes, it was disappointing and he belongs on the list, I didn't think the decision-making was too poor, which is why he's not top 5 on the list. But yeah, it was a disaster. But we'll see if he can Andrew Thomas it and turn from terrible to great from year 1 to 2. Number 5, Cole Strange, who, again, I would say that Cole Strange has been a better player than Evan Neal, and they picked him at 29th, whereas Evan Neal was obviously picked at 7th. So from that perspective, you could look at this and say, shouldn't I'd be looking at this and saying, no, obviously Cole Strange was the better selection then. Well, looking at it that way, sure. But again, I'm taking into account thought process. He was the 89th projected player, and he came in, to be honest, played like that. He played like a third-round guard, which is like a fine player, but nothing spectacular. And for Bill Belichick, you usually trust him with offensive linemen, but this was just a massive reach that he didn't have to make. So, after we wanted to kind of say after the draft, well, is there something we don't know? It's Bill Belichick. Could something happen here that maybe makes us say, okay, you know what? In hindsight, yeah, I get it. So far, we have not yet seen that from Cole Strange, which to me, the Giants one made more sense, even though it's ended up working out worse. This one kind of has worked out exactly how we thought it would work out, which makes it just all that much more confusing. Number 4, the Green Bay Packers, Quay Walker, who they drafted with actually their first draft pick that they had in the first round, because they had picked 22 and 28. They used 22 on Quay Walker, which is a surprise. It was a surprise at the time. I didn't fully understand why they made that decision when they did. I never really got the Quay Walker hype, and I guess some Packers fans really like Quay Walker for whatever reason. I've watched a lot of his tape, and I have he has some flash plays, I'll say that. There still is potential for Quay Walker. Again, there's no player who I would say has no potential on this list. Every single player could be very good. But again, when you reach on a player and they don't have a good rookie year, in my opinion, then yeah, that's going to put you high up on this list. It just is. And with number 3, with the Texans, it's kind of the same thing. Kenyon Green, who was selected 15th overall by the Houston Texans, he wasn't very good as a rookie. In fact, he was kind of a disaster as a rookie, I thought. There's still hope for him, sure. Again, like I say that with every player, because it's true with every player. But, he was projected to go 27th. He goes 15th, and he looked like he wasn't even projected to go 100th. I was actually kind of a big Kenyon Green hater coming out of the draft. I had him as my 64th rated prospect. I remember that because I did top 64, and he just made the list. But I had him as a fringe second rounder. He goes in the middle of the first, and looks like he shouldn't have even been a third rounder. So it's 1 year. We'll see how he develops. I do think he can improve and become a better player, but as of right now, it's looking like, there were better players on the board that I could have gone with instead of Green. And number 2, let's stick with the Houston Texans, why don't we? Let's go with Derek Stingley, who I actually didn't hate his rookie year necessarily. The pick itself, it's in a vacuum. Listen, spent a 3rd overall pick on a player who has a lot of potential, had a very up and down rookie year, but he plays corner. Those guys take time to develop and are just kind of fluky in general. He showed some flashes. I'm not mad at the player, and I think that he would still be worth a 1st round pick today, certainly. But the fact that the very next selection was Sauce Gardner, who looks like he could be an all-world superstar corner who is, again, getting Darrelle Revis comparisons, that stings a little bit if you're a Texans fan. So that's kind of the main thing. And again, this isn't a hindsight as 2020 thing. Sauce Gardner was by most considered to be the better corner. That's what a lot of people thought. Not everyone. There were people who had Stingley ahead, but Gardner was number 2 on a consensus big board. Stingley was number 4. So again, the selection itself, fine, but the fact that you got him over Sauce, that's where the issue arises, especially with how good Sauce has looked in year 1. But again, there's still time. Number 1, you already knew who it was going to be. Travon Walker, who was picked 1st overall. I did not have him as a 1st round talent coming out of the draft. He was 5th overall on the consensus big board, though. So listen, people liked him. I get why people liked him. I get why the Jaguars said, you know what, let's take this real project player and see if we can turn him into a superstar unlike any guy we've ever seen in the NFL. Like, maybe we can make that happen. Let's take that big swing. But 1st overall, that's just not the time to make that decision, in my opinion. And listen, it could work out. And I fully expected him to have a rough rookie year, and I thought that he showed some things as a rookie. Mostly his ability to bull rush tight ends was very good. Other than that, he still has yet to show he can be a guy who can consistently win against even decent tackles at the NFL level with any consistency. But again, could it happen? Sure. He's a developmental guy. He hasn't developed yet. Definitely not someone who couldn't work out, but given the fact that he was drafted 1st overall, and given how good Hutchinson and Thibodeau looked year 1, if you're a Jaguars fan, you have to be looking at that a little bit like, man, against Kansas City, would have been nice to have Hutchinson. Would have been nice to have Thibodeau. Would have been nice to have Sauce Gardner out there instead of Travon Walker, who I thought got pretty severely outplayed by Arden Key last year. But again, like I said, we knew it was going to take him some time. I'm not going to sit here on one hand and say Travon Walker is not going to be good right away because of all these issues, and then when he has a bad rookie year, sit here and say, well, I guess that means he's never going to succeed. No, he could succeed, but it's going to take him some time, and it probably won't even be at the start of next year. Probably will take him more time than that, I would assume. But yeah, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.